and your son Stephen Bell was murdered at the age of 22, and you're a knife crime campaigner, gainer. And, you know, the guy that did this was actually released early.
It's only been a few months since Starmer became chief executive, but for him and his government, that time has turned into a real nightmare. Under pressure from the public and the opposition, he is desperately trying to bring the situation under control after a series of disastrous decisions that have rocked the country. The manifesto of the Labour Party shows a shocking disregard for the elderly. This has never happened before. This discovery was a real blow, and we have no explanation why such a decision was made this year. We are in 6th place among the richest economies in the world, but the authorities are ruthlessly robbing pensioners. Why aren't they outraged? The suffering that Starmer causes to the elderly is deeply disturbing to all of us. Why shouldn't they express their dissatisfaction? His callous actions towards the elderly in such a short period of his reign cause universal indignation and rage. Imagine you are retired, barely making ends meet, and the new Prime Minister brazenly deprives you of even modest financial assistance of £300 just to close some financial hole that he dreams of. And on top of that, he generously gives away millions to those who are already basking in luxury. How is this possible? It really makes you wonder whose side he's really on. We cannot remain indifferent to this injustice.
One of the people released from one of the northern prisons yesterday had, wait for it, 109 previous convictions. So that person, I would say, is bound to reoffend. Well, I'm joined down the line by Gaynor Bell, and your son Stephen Bell was murdered at the age of 22, and you're a knife crime campaigner, Gaynor. And, you know, the guy that did this was actually released early, wasn't he?
Yes. But not only that, you know, I foresaw that he'd reoffend again, which he has done. He's reoffended for a violent crime. This guy, to me, is somebody that terrifies me to be on the streets, because before the age of 20, he committed something like 19 crimes. That was before he killed my son.
The salary of each junior doctor will be increased by 22%, which will amount to almost £600 million. Isn't this a clear manifestation of favoritism and hypocrisy towards the elderly, who especially need support with the onset of winter? Despite criticism for his apparent bias, Starmer continues to stir up scandals. What will be his next genius step? Will he allow criminals to roam the streets with impunity? Let's look at the terrible consequences that this can lead to. One of the main responsibilities of the state is to keep people in custody until they are convicted. However, we are now in a situation where thousands of prisoners will be released in the coming weeks and months. You saw all the horror and shock of a mother that the murderer of her son was released before the end of his term.
The government has confirmed this afternoon, just a few minutes ago, that it has offered the junior doctors an average uplift of 22.3%. So that means that the junior doctors who were on strike for the past 20 months, they were holding out for a pay restoration of somewhere in the region of about 35%. They've been talking to the government, the new government, for the last couple of weeks. Remember, Wes Streeting, the incoming health secretary, said he had made it a top priority to get around that table, to talk to the BMA, the union representing the junior doctors, and find a way of resolving this dispute.
I categorically insist that it is necessary to punish the most dangerous criminals more strictly so that our streets become safer for citizens. Keir Starmer's actions pose a real threat to society. We are watching rapists and criminals being freed because of unwise decisions, and this, in fact, puts the lives of completely innocent people at risk. If tragedies occur related to these decisions, all responsibility will fall on Keir Starmer, and this will be unacceptable. I can't help but note how he vehemently condemned Sunak's actions when he only suggested thinking about reducing the number of prisoners. Now his position looks like blatant hypocrisy. When it comes to public safety, such two-faced approaches are unacceptable. Where is his moral responsibility to the citizens? Undoubtedly, this time requires courage and honesty from politicians, and not attempts to please certain groups of citizens. It is important that our leaders are aware of reality and make decisions based on the public good, not on political games.
Some of that money was for the loan of a flat during the election period. No money changed hands.
Yes, and that was related to your son.
Yeah, there was no cash adjustment. We had a situation where the election was called, not when we expected it, I think most people. My son happened to be in the middle of his GCSEs. That means there are a lot of journalists outside the front door and in the street. I'm not complaining about that, but if you're 13, as my girl is, if you're 16, as my boy is, that's quite hard to navigate when you're concentrating on GCSEs. Now, hear me out, because you put it to me.
Yeah.
So I said, we're going to get you out of here and get you somewhere where you can just study and get to school and back without having to go through all of that. And that's when someone said, well, in which case I can make this flat available to you. It's safe, secure, he can get on with the job. No money exchanged hands, no money exchanged hands, but for the registrar, no, but you've put it to me, let me just finish. For the registrar's purposes, he says, well, I know you didn't pay and nobody gave you money, but let's work out what it would have been worth if it had been a commercial transaction, which it wasn't. So I'm not saying, of course I understand why you ask questions, etc. But I do think sometimes it's important just to sort of look behind the number and say, what was the human story behind some of this? And I wasn't going to let my son fail or not do well in his GCSEs because of journalists outside our front door.
What an absurd sight. Does Starmer not realize how much he is demonstrating his selfish and greedy nature by making such excuses? This is simply unbearable. Moreover, the fact that he puts his son as a shield only highlights his own failures. And such actions have brought his popularity to historic records of decline, and according to YouGov polls, he has become the most disliked Prime Minister in the history of Great Britain. His power is rapidly disintegrating, and if he does not stop his insane actions, his position will be under serious threat. This is severe retribution for the suffering he inflicted on the elderly and the poor with his ruthless decisions. If he does not sincerely begin to realize his mistakes and act in the interests of the people, then a bitter and humiliating ending awaits him. Time is against him, and the consequences of his actions are just around the corner. Every step he takes brings him closer to an imminent collapse, and only sincere repentance can save him from a complete fall. The people will not forgive such betrayals, and a backlash will undoubtedly follow.
Perhaps the most ludicrous part of the Prime Minister's speech on Monday was when he said he won't accept the idea that any of the problems people are facing are caused by the 14 years of Conservative government. He won't say how many prisoners they've released early. He won't say if they're burglars, abusers or stalkers. He won't say where they are or what support their victims are getting. Yet he thinks he has the right to tell people they can't blame his government for any of it. Doesn't he think that rather than confiscating lanyards like some jumped-up milk monitor, he should stop issuing get-out-of-jail cards free to prisoners considered a risk to children?
Keir Starmer, it would seem, set out to change the world, but instead became a symbol of double standards. His lavish life of luxury is a contrast to the reality faced by many residents of the country. How can you talk about change when you yourself spend time among wealth, not noticing how his choices affect the everyday life of ordinary people? Each new report on his spending only increases discontent and skepticism. It becomes clear that Starmer is not just ignoring the problems, but is also happy to use them to his advantage. People see how he continues to accept gifts and privileges that most can only dream of receiving. Moreover, his close ties with major donors undermine confidence in his intentions. Is it possible to believe in the sincerity of the intentions of a person who lives as if in a parallel reality where the financial crisis bypasses him? In addition, his decision to use Lord Allies real estate for his election strategy underscores how far he has become from those he is trying to present as his constituents. All this situation only highlights the gap between the government and those whom this government serves. Now the question is whether he will be able to meet expectations or, conversely, will finally lose the trust of those he seeks to represent. Thanks for watching this video. See you soon.